John.
All right, great, thanks. So I was really thrilled meeting Spencer and seeing that he's thinking about all these things as well. This is something I've been thinking about in the past, and I was really excited when I got word that he wanted me to give this presentation. So I started digging together some of my old stuff and also some of the stuff I'm currently working on, which is actually quite relevant. So pulled that all together in this presentation. I originally tried to make it about 20 minutes, but it might be a little longer than that. And but I think we won't have as much time to discuss it as it merits. I think be thinking about things that you would like to discuss further, and at least let's vet them in this at the end of the call here, and we can record them and possibly have time on the retreat to get into more detail. So be thinking about questions and issues you have with this. So what I'd like to start off with is a quick overview. I'm just going to give it a little background from where I'm coming from, talk about this concept of Web 2.0 and Wikinomics. Wikinomics for conservation science, like what could this look like? I think Spencer just gave a really good overview of that. I'm going to talk about some of the emerging best practices and pitfalls that I've found in the books I've been reading and the literature I've been reading. And then look a little bit at putting it into practice. And the decision support system I've been working on the last several years, over the course of the summer, I was figuring out a way to try and get that out there as an open source tool and try and use Wikinomics to drive it forward. And so I'll give a quick overview of that. And then a note is that we're actually recording this, if that's all right with everybody. If not, let us know now or give a chat. And so other people that are missing it can join in if we want. And also it builds on the whole idea of Web 2.0, which is this new idea of publish first, then filter later is one of the mottos of Wikinomics. So getting into a little bit just where I'm coming from, just to be clear for everybody, because every presentation has its biases, and you don't know me very well yet, so you don't know my biases. So I'll give a quick overview of that. Here's a steelhead. I grew up in a small town, and one of the things I loved to do was go fishing for steelhead in the mountains, in the redwood streams, and now you can't do that anymore, and it's a shame. And there's a lot of things like this, and I just feel like in many ways we're losing ground as hard as we're fighting. And let's see. Okay, there we go. And one of my favorite speakers, this is Michael Soule. He gave a great presentation several years ago about conservation science and the movement. And some people call him the father of ecology. You know, he blushes at that and moves on. But he gave a great presentation where he actually talked about how it's okay to recognize those losses and to see what's going on. He actually broke down and cried on stage. It was really a moving thing, but it's just important to recognize that. And the trends are difficult. The trends are tough. You know, it's like not only is the population growing on the planet, but it's more and more urban. People are getting more and more disconnected from nature, and the assumption is that they're not as attached to it. And you know, so we have the last child in the woods. We have more and more kids being digital, and it's just a tough trend, a tough challenge. And so one of my philosophies about this is that technology, while some people would say it's the root of a lot of this and a lot of our consumption and a lot of our problems, we're stuck with it, and it's a double-edged sword. So we might as well use the sword to our advantage. And so GIS is a good example, and this new emerging paradigm of Web 2.0 and what it's all about is another one of these type of things. And I feel like it's important that conservation jumps on that and leverages it. And I think it actually provides a better opportunity for the conservation movement compared to a lot of other fields and business areas. So I came to this originally through a planning issues class that I was a TA for 3 years, looking at this idea of planning being so multidisciplinary and so many issues involved and the communication that has to happen. So I ended up getting a class project together that was kind of a Web 2.0 type idea of coming up with a shared vision that could be linked and people could reference it. I went to several public participation GIS conferences furthering up on this, and then was awarded the Dangerman Fellowship and was able to spend a lot of time writing an extra chapter of my dissertation that focused on this idea of engaged conservation planning and management. And then more recently, this landscape decision support tool and how to release it. And so that's where I'm at. And some of the influential things that I think could be useful for our discussions moving forward, if we want to move forward with this route, is this one book I sent the intro out about on Wikinomics. And in this one, he really argues that we're in a major paradigm shift in communication. And if you look back in history, one of them was actually being able to do handwriting. So instead of only the verbal word, handwriting really changed the name of the game. And then along came the printing press. And the scribes, the professional scribes, they weren't too happy about that. But it really revolutionized the amount of people that can read your work if you went ahead and got it printed. And now another paradigm shift in communication is happening right now in Web 2.0. And this really opens up really great opportunities for mass collaboration. For the first time, a lot more people, it's not just governments and major institutions that have this global communication power, but now it's the general public. And just so we're clear, Web 2.0 is an emerging web software and culture that's going on. It's not just the software tools, but it's also this culture. It's driven by asynchronous behavior and interaction, so it's at different times, oftentimes. It's distributed, hence all of us in our offices around the country. It's two-way, and it's not just one unidirectional as Web 1.0 was. It's oftentimes it's real-time and unfiltered, and it doesn't really require an intermediary for the most part. So here's some common examples. And another really influential book is this book called Here Comes Everybody by Clay Shirky. And I've been drawing from that as well and looking at these issues. And he's a bit more academic. He's actually a professor. And so the book is a bit more detached. It's really looking at, okay, well, what's happening here? And it was written in 2008. So it's pretty current. And he also talks about, okay, well, what seems to be working when there's successful groups, successful interactions on Web 2.0? Why is it successful? So I'm going to draw from those later on in the presentation. Well, actually, this is one example, too, that comes out of the Wikinomics book. So Linux is a computer operating system, and I think this is a really telling example in a lot of different ways. So it's, similar to Windows or Apple operating system. And it was created originally, basically this guy named Torvalds released the core code, just a little seed of code that he wrote in Unix, saying, hey, this could actually be the core of an operating system. It's 1/1000th of the way there, or maybe 1/1,000,000th, but it's the heart of it. And I think that's a good idea. And he released it free to everybody on his list server. This was even before the internet was invented, well, in widespread use. So eventually he released it on the general public license, which means everybody's welcome to use it. They just must share the improvements they make to it. And then it really caught on, and it was just growing like wildfire. In 1999, IBM, one of the biggest companies in the world, decided to engage in this. And it was actually a really wise business move on their part, because they were really focusing on providing services, to big businesses, server services, and they were really getting pinched on both ends by the hardware developers as well as software developers, namely Windows at that point. And then they realized, hey, this free operating system might actually work. And so they invested a lot in it. And now it's just really growing phenomenally. It's growing 8 times faster than the server market. It's actually one of the more solid server stacks out there. It's embraced by some big groups of people such as China, BMW, IBM, Motorola, Sony, and others. So it just goes to show kind of what this Web 2.0 experience can do. This was driven almost primarily by volunteers. So again, interrupt me anytime if you want. So now getting into a little bit more about what is Wiki conservation science. There's a lot to this question, and this is only a stab at a partial answer. Spencer hit on most of this already, and so if you really look at engaging, 1,000-fold times more people, some of it could be in data collection, entry, and sharing, such as eBird and databasing, and also in for the phenology webinar that's coming up. I think that fits nicely in this area. Also, you can talk about stakeholder engagement, being able to identify real-world research needs and data on attitudes and values from people. There's all sorts of science fiction ideas out there that are in practice now, such as being able to watch a little TV show of actors talking about certain issues and then being able to vote in real time with your remote control about issues and how you feel about things. And that could all be data that goes into these big models. Also looking at model co-creation and sharing, and then even adaptive management and monitoring. And just a few slides overviewing the engaged conservation planning and management angle of my dissertation that could be relevant further down the road, but it's really looking at this idea of just engaging a lot more people. And then if you engage a lot more people, the idea is that they will probably have a lot more buy-in to conservation science. So you can have the web in the middle. It doesn't have to be called the web of resilience. That was the thought at the time. But you can have modeling and mapping, providing input to the web of resilience, but also receiving data from it, as well as all these other corners. And then, of course, also having traditional lines of communication is vital, both for for a lot of different reasons. This right here comes from stakeholder theory in the fact that in any given issue, either be it for a region or just for a topic that's nationwide or worldwide, a lot of times all the people that are interested, only a few people are actually engaged in the process. These are the red people, the red dots. Each dot is a person. And so one way of classifying stakeholders is on their degree of power, like how much influence they have on the process, their degree of legitimacy, such as are the landowners in question, and then also their degree of urgency. How much are they going to be influenced by the outcome? And so this is a caricature of how things used to be done and what Web 2.0 for conservation science could look like with all this engagement. Could be something much more like this, where you have people from all ends of the spectrum being able to be engaged in some form or another. Granted, there could be checks and balances all throughout. Maybe people in the lower left corner don't have as much influence on the final output, but at least they're engaged. And a working hypothesis is that if you do engage those people, then actually they will increase in their legitimacy and power. And actually the conservation movement could move towards the top right corner. So that's just a hypothesis. But some of the documented benefits of engagement are that you get more buy-in to your products by your end users. There's a lot more consensus building and reducing of conflict, building trust. More people are able to navigate the science that you're working with through the socio-political maze. It builds more understanding of conservation science, and it gets people out in nature. Really taps into economies of scale. That's the big thing, because cost is one of the major barriers to a lot of this. And I think a really big one, and Spencer alluded to it as well, is that this really increases the usefulness to the end user.